Hey everyone and welcome back. You know you're a serious UPSC aspirant if Byrnihat rings a bell.
It's certainly been making headlines.
Big time. It was recently named the most polluted city in the world.
Out of everywhere.
I know, right? And when you think polluted city, you probably picture like massive factories and skyscrapers, right?
Yay, some urban sprawl.
But Byrnihat, this place is known for its natural beauty, its hills. It's on the border of Meghalaya and Assam.
Quite a juxtaposition.
For sure. So today, we're diving deep into why this is happening, what's going on in Byrnihat that's causing this huge air quality crisis, and we'll also touch on why this matters for anyone prepping for the UPSC exams.
Should be interesting.
Definitely. So first things first, can you give us a little background on Byrnihat itself, location, that kind of thing?
Sure. So geographically, Byrnihat sits in a really interesting spot. It's about 20 kilometers from Guwahati and 65 kilometers from Shillong.
So right between two major cities.
Exactly. And it's right where the Meghalaya Hills start to descend into the plains of Guwahati.
Ah, so a sort of transition zone.
Yes, and that makes it a prime location for industry. You've got factories springing up on both the Meghalaya and Assam sides.
So it's a bit of an industrial hub then.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a big part of our story today.
Okay, so let's get into that. What kind of industries are we talking about here?
Well, Meghalaya has a lot of coal reserves, so naturally many industries rely on that. Things like coke production, cement manufacturing, ferroalloys, steel plants, you name it.
So heavy industry.
Yeah. And then you've also got distillery units, brick-making operations, all drawn to the area because it's so close to the huge market in Guwahati.
Plus, I imagine the Umtru River provides a steady water supply.
You got it. All the ingredients for an industrial boom.
But a boom that comes at a cost, it seems. To really grasp how big this pollution problem is, we need some numbers. How many industries are we talking about here?
A lot. Meghalaya's Action Plan for Prevention and Control of Air Pollution, which came out at the end of 2024, actually gives us the numbers. 39 industrial units in Assam and 41 in Meghalaya.
Wow, and all concentrated in Byrnihat.
All in that same area, yeah.
That's a staggering amount of industrial activity for one small town.
Mm.
But I guess not all industries pollute equally, right?
You're right. They're actually categorized based on their pollution levels.
Makes sense. So what are the categories?
The worst offenders are the red category industries. Cement production, distilleries, iron and steel plants, coke production. The real heavy hitters when it comes to pollution.
The backbone of Byrnihat's industry, unfortunately.
Right. And then you have the orange category, which are a bit less polluting.
Right.
Brick manufacturing, cement clinker grinding, things like that.
Okay, so we've got this classification system, but the big question is, are these industries actually following the rules? Are they sticking to environmental regulations?
Well, that's where things get a little murky. The Meghalaya chief minister actually revealed recently that they did some surprise inspections in the beginning of the year. And guess what?
I have a feeling it's not good news.
7 industrial units had to be shut down, and 2 others were slapped with environmental compensation.
Sounds like they were caught red-handed.
Pretty much. They were found to have excessive emissions because their pollution control devices weren't working. Some had the devices but weren't using them, and others weren't even sending the required online emission data.
Cutting corners at the expense of the environment.
It's a classic case of profits over planet, and it seems to be happening on both sides of the border. The Assam Pollution Control Board chairman also confirmed that they've issued notices to several industries on their side for similar violations.
So it's not just a Meghalaya problem.
Not at all. He actually mentioned that many of them have the equipment to control pollution but just choose not to use it.
Why?
Too expensive, apparently. The energy costs are too high.
It's really disheartening to see these industries prioritizing profit over the health of the environment, especially with an air quality crisis as severe as Byrnihat's.
Yeah.
I mean, are fines and closure notices really enough to deter this behavior? Shouldn't there be stricter penalties, maybe even criminal charges?
That's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. While punishment is important, we also have to think about incentivizing cleaner technologies and practices. We need to work towards a more sustainable future for Byrnihat and other industrial towns like it.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked a lot about industrial activity, but what about traffic? Byrnihat's a key transit point, right?
Yeah.
So vehicular emissions have got to play a role in this too.
Absolutely. It's a constant stream of heavy diesel vehicles passing through, many of which don't even meet emission standards.
It's like a double whammy then. You've got the factories themselves, and then all the trucks coming and going, adding to the pollution burden.
Exactly. And you can't forget about all those trucks idling in traffic jams, just pumping out more fumes.
Plus, I remember reading about a survey done by CSR NERI. They found that even unpaved roads are contributing significantly to dust levels.
Oh, yeah, that's a big factor, too. All of this just adds up, creates a really unhealthy environment for the people living there.
So we've got industries, we've got vehicles, but I'm curious about Byrnihat's geography. Could the lay of the land be making things worse? Could it be trapping all these pollutants?
That's a great point, and you're absolutely right. Byrnihat's bowl-like topography is definitely exacerbating the problem.
Bowl-like.
Yeah, picture a bowl holding all the bad stuff.
Okay, I'm starting to see it.
The town is surrounded by hills, right? And it sits at a pretty low altitude, about 60 meters. So the wind speed is reduced, and that makes it really hard for pollutants to disperse.
So they just get stuck there.
Exactly. They basically get trapped in this valley, leading to a buildup of all that harmful particulate matter in the air.
So it really is a perfect storm. You've got rampant industrial activity, heavy traffic, and this geographical feature that's basically acting as a giant pollutant trap. No wonder Byrnihat is facing such a severe air quality crisis.
It's a combination of factors, and it really highlights the complex environmental challenges we're facing, not just in Byrnihat, but across India and the world.
And that brings us to why we're talking about this today, especially for our UPSC aspirants out there. Understanding environmental issues like this is crucial for your exams.
Absolutely. Air pollution, especially in the context of industrial development and urban planning, is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the UPSC syllabus. You could easily see questions about Byrnihat's unique geography and what's contributing to its pollution in the geography paper, for example.
Right. And for those focusing on the environment paper, this is a perfect case study. It's a real-world example of the challenges we face in trying to balance economic development with environmental sustainability.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the governance angle. UPSC loves to ask about the role of government agencies in monitoring and enforcing regulations, the hurdles they face, and whether their policies are actually effective.
So Byrnihat's story, while local, has much broader implications. It's a microcosm of the larger environmental challenges we face globally.
Precisely. It's a lens to which we can examine the interconnectedness of these issues, the industrial practices, the policies, and how it all impacts public health.
We've covered a lot of ground already, setting the scene for understanding this complex situation. We've looked at the industrial landscape, the role of traffic, and how geography is playing its part, all contributing to Byrnihat's unfortunate ranking as the world's most polluted city. And like we said, this is super relevant for all our UPSC aspirants out there.
We've only just scratched the surface, though.
Right. In part 2, we'll shift gears and explore some potential solutions to Byrnihat's air quality crisis. What can be done to clean up the air in Byrnihat? What can other industrial towns in India facing similar challenges learn from this?
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back, everyone. In part 1, we really laid bare the harsh reality of Byrnihat's air pollution. We talked about the industries, the traffic, how the geography traps all the pollutants. I'm sure our UPSC aspirants out there are already seeing how this could show up on their exams.
Definitely. Byrnihat is like a case study in how environmental problems are tied to geography, governance, and policy. All those things are super important for the UPSC.
Absolutely. But, okay, knowing the problem is one thing. But what about solutions? That's the real test, right? Figuring out how to tackle this crisis, not just in Byrnihat, but in all those other industrial towns across India dealing with the same issues. Coming up with solutions is what really sets apart a UPSC aspirant, wouldn't you say?
100%. Okay, so maybe the most obvious place to start is stricter enforcement of the environmental laws that are already in place. We've seen that a lot of industries in Byrnihat are just ignoring the rules, putting profits ahead of the environment and people's health.
Right, so what are we talking about here? More inspections, higher fines, maybe even shutting down repeat offenders.
Yeah.
Is that enough to get them to take things seriously?
Those are all important steps for sure. Holding industries accountable is essential. But just punishing them all the time might not be the best long-term solution.
Yeah, like playing whack-a-mole. It's not really solving the root of the problem.
Exactly. We need to find that balance. So alongside stricter enforcement, we should also be encouraging the use of cleaner technologies.
I like that. Rewarding good behavior instead of just punishing bad behavior.
Yeah.
What kind of incentives are we talking about?
Well, you could give tax breaks to industries that invest in pollution control equipment, or offer subsidies for adopting cleaner production methods, maybe even give preferential treatment in government contracts to companies that are committed to sustainability.
So basically making it more profitable to go green instead of seeing environmental regulations as a burden.
Exactly. And then there's the whole role of technology in all of this. There are some really exciting new continuous emission monitoring systems. They give you real-time data on what industries are emitting, so it's easier for the authorities to spot and deal with violations quickly.
That's awesome. Like having eyes everywhere. No more flying into the radar for these polluters.
Right. And technology can also help with vehicular emissions. We have emission standards, but actually making sure people follow them on the road is a different story.
Yeah, having the rules is one thing, enforcing them is another, especially with so much traffic flowing through Byrnihat all the time.
Right. But imagine if we had remote sensing devices that could spot vehicles breaking the emission rules as they're driving. That would be a game changer for enforcement.
Wow, like a constant eye in the sky for emissions. Love it. But okay, let's zoom out a bit. Is it even possible to move away from these polluting industries altogether? Can we transition to something more sustainable? I mean, Byrnihat is so reliant on these industries right now.
It's a big shift for sure, but it is possible gradually. We can start by supporting startups that are working on clean energy, encouraging innovation in renewable technologies, and we can help existing businesses switch to things like solar or wind power.
So basically create a system that supports a more sustainable future. Less reliance on fossil fuels, less environmental impact.
Exactly. And don't forget about urban planning. Green spaces, parks, forests around industrial zones can make a big difference.
Oh, interesting. They act as like a buffer zone. Less pollution reaching residential areas, better air quality for everyone.
Right. And remember those unpaved roads we talked about. Just paving those roads and controlling the dust can improve air quality significantly.
It seems like we've got a lot of options on the table here. Stricter enforcement, technology, cleaner industries, urban planning.
Yeah.
But how do we know what's really going to work best?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's tough to say for sure. It will probably take a combination of all those things tailored to each specific location.
Yeah, there's no magic bullet for something as complex as air pollution.
Nope. It takes careful thinking, creative solutions, and being willing to try new things. And this is where our UPSC listeners come in. This is what sets you apart. Understanding these issues, weighing the different solutions, proposing strategies that work pro-to-fit. These are the skills that will make you successful, both in your exams and in your careers.
This has been so eye-opening so far. We've gone from dissecting the problem to exploring all sorts of solutions. We've talked about the role of government, technology, clean energy, and urban planning.
But we're not done yet.
There's more. In part 3, we're going to dig into something that often gets overlooked, the role of individual citizens. What can we do as individuals to help clean up the air? Can our small actions really make a difference?
Stay tuned to find out.
And welcome back to the Deep Dive. So we've talked about the pretty alarming air quality crisis in Byrnihat. We've gone through the industries, the traffic, and how the geography kind of traps all those pollutants. We even threw out some big picture solutions like tougher regulations, using cool tech, maybe even a full-on switch to clean energy. But before we wrap things up, I wanted to circle back to something we mentioned at the end of part 2. It's about the role of, well, us, regular citizens. It's easy to feel kind of helpless when you're dealing with a problem as big as air pollution, right? Like, what can one person actually do? Do our individual efforts even matter?
I get that. It's a question that comes up a lot. But honestly, I really do believe that individual actions, when enough people do them, can add up to a real push for change.
So it's not about saying individual efforts don't matter. It's more about recognizing that together they can create a bigger wave. Okay, but where do we even start? What can regular people, especially those aspiring UPSC leaders who are listening, what can we do to make the air cleaner in our communities and beyond?
First things first, we've got to know what we're dealing with. Educating ourselves and the people around us about what causes air pollution and how bad it is, that's huge. It's not about memorizing a bunch of data. It's about getting the basics and talking about it, raising awareness with our families, friends, neighbors, everyone.
Yeah, knowledge is power, right? The more we understand, the better we can fight for change and make good choices in our own lives.
Exactly. And that brings me to my next point. Personal choices. Think about it. If we choose public transport or riding bikes or walking instead of always taking our cars, that cuts down on emissions. Even little changes in how we get around can add up and make the air cleaner.
And for those of us who can't completely ditch the car, carpooling is a good option.
For sure. It's all about being aware of our transportation habits and choosing greener ways to travel whenever we can.
Totally. Oh, and we can't forget about what we do at home, right? Things like switching to appliances that save energy, being careful about how much electricity we use, even planting trees around our houses. All those things contribute to cleaner air.
You got it.
Yeah.
These are all things anyone can do, no matter who you are or what you have. It's about making eco-friendly choices part of our everyday lives.
I like that. Okay, but what about people who want to do more than just individual stuff? What if they want to push for bigger changes, like policy changes? How can we influence the people in charge and make sure they're doing their part to clean up the air?
That's where being an active citizen comes in. Supporting those environmental groups that are fighting air pollution, joining awareness campaigns, speaking up, and letting local officials know what we think. These are all ways to make our voices heard and push for cleaner air policies.
So it's about using our rights as citizens, holding our leaders accountable, and fighting for policies that put people's health and the environment first.
Exactly. And don't forget, you folks listening, you're the future leaders, the policymakers. You have the power to create real change, to make policies that support sustainable development and a healthy environment.
This whole deep dive has been such a journey. We started with how bad the air is in Byrnihat, looked at all the different factors involved, and even brainstormed some solutions, both from the top down and the bottom up.
We talked about government regulations, using technology, switching to clean energy, and smart urban planning.
But we also talked about how important it is for individuals to do their part, making eco-friendly choices and speaking up for change.
Byrnihat's story really shows us that environmental problems aren't just something you read about in a textbook. They're real, they affect real people, and they impact everyone's health and well-being.
And as future leaders, our UPSC aspirants have a duty to not just understand these problems, but to think critically about them and come up with real solutions.
Right. And remember, this deep dive is just the beginning. We encourage you to keep digging into this issue, learn more, and keep talking about it. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about individual action versus big policy changes? What solutions resonated with you the most? Let's keep this conversation going.
I'm with you on that. And if you found this episode helpful, please like, subscribe, and share it with your fellow UPSC friends. We got most of our information from a recent article in the Indian Express, so definitely check that out for a more in-depth look. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.